This video is sponsored by celebstory.com. Following the defeat of the Ottoman Empire after World War I, the new country of Turkey was modernized by its first president, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, and he wanted a new, modernized nation acceptable to the world. Turkey has also long taken self-pride in their having been neutral during World War II, and the fact that they were clean and not involved in the Holocaust, despite their continued business dealings with Germany during the war. Was Turkey really neutral during the war despite not being an open belligerent? How true is the claim that Turkey was not involved in the Holocaust? What were Turkey's actions towards Jews and others in violation of international law? Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, military veteran, historian, author, and welcome to this episode of Forgotten History. During the 1930s and into the war, more than half of Turkey's trade was with Germany following the election of Adolf Hitler. Their greatest export was chrome ore, as chromium was and still is a major component in making stainless steel and weapons. Turkey was officially neutral in World War II for the most part, but despite its neutrality policy, Turkey maintained strong diplomatic and economic relations with Germany, to include supplying its own style of pogroms against Jews, Armenians, and others during the Holocaust. Jews were at the top of the list. Turkey denaturalized upwards of 5,000 Jews who were Turkish citizens living abroad, and two separate shipments of 2,200 and 2,500 Jews, respectively, were deported with German assistance in Bulgaria to extermination camps, primarily Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Sobibor. Before the war, Germany encouraged neutral countries to repatriate their Jewish citizens, and Turkish diplomats received specific instructions to avoid repatriating Jews back to Turkey, even if they could prove their Turkish nationality. This was especially problematic for Turkish dual nationals. The Turkish government simply stripped them of their Turkish nationality, claiming that they were citizens of the other nation in question. In fact, Turkey was also the only neutral country to implement anti-Jewish laws during the war, modeled on the German example. Between 1940 and 1944, approximately 13,000 European, Soviet, and Turkish Jews passed through Turkey from Europe to British-controlled Mandatory Palestine, which built up the concentrations of Jews living in what would later become Israel after the war. However, as was true with most nations, there were a few Turks in positions of influence who tried to save Jews from being sent to German camps. After the war, the Turkish government created a very active propaganda campaign claiming that they were highly active in saving Jews from the Holocaust. This is a blatant lie, much like the total denials of the Armenian genocide, which will be covered in a future show. Historian Rifat Bali claims that more Turkish Jews suffered as a result of discriminatory policies during the war than were saved by Turkey. Celebstory.com, the world's only website that shows photos of famous people in chronological order by date. So you see the person's progression from young to old. Cool, right? Here you can find personalities of all fields, from musicians and actors to scientists, leaders, and even criminals. Plus, it's wiki-based, so anyone can upload pictures or create new galleries. The website evolves in real time and absorbs new, interesting, and rare photos every day. Because of contributors like me and, I hope you, the website is growing fast, and soon people will use celebstory.com as a resource as often as they use Wikipedia. So kids around the world, as well as researchers, will have a huge source of updated info, well protected from AI fakes. I keep contributing to the website. Just look at all these comments and likes. The system gives me points for each upload. When I have enough, I can spend them on uploading to the special category intended for real-life heroes. It can be for any person who did something remarkable, maybe even your friend or relative. Besides the points, 3 users who gained the most points during the month will get this trophy made from the American steel with a unique engraving. I will personally choose the quotes that will be engraved on the first 3 items. As a bonus to the trophy, there are cash prizes every month. $500 for the first place, $300 second place, $200 third place. The current cycle is November plus December, with the results published on the 1st of January. So, create your celebstory.com account now. After 1937, immigration was strictly limited to those persons who could prove that they were of the Turkish race. Things were to get worse for the Jews in Turkey. During the war, Jews faced mandatory conscription into forced labor battalions, and then the 1942 wealth tax was finally imposed to financially ruin non-Muslim citizens. Of additional interest, unlike Portugal, Sweden, Switzerland, and even Spain, Turkey was the only neutral country to implement severe anti-Jewish laws during the war. These were as harsh as anything Hitler had implemented in Germany. Just prior to the war in 1939, Turkish Prime Minister Refik Saydam stated that Turkey would not accept masses of Jews, nor individuals who were oppressed in other countries. Around 100 German Jewish academics were accepted into the country as refugees due to their education and contributions to society. However, this did not go unnoticed, since there were many German members of the Nazi Party employed in Turkey, especially in the precious metals exportation business. Then there was the pogrom of the 20 classes, in Turkish, Yirmi Kira Nafiye Askerleri, which meant literally soldiers for public works by drawing of 20 lots, or Yirmi Kira İletidar Alay. This was the incident of the reserve soldiers by drawing of 20 lots, a conscription method used to conscript the male non-Muslim minority population, which was primarily of the Christian Armenians, Greeks, Kurds, Assyrians, and, of course, Jews. These conscriptions started in May 1941 and included the elderly, handicapped, infirm, and mentally ill. They were not trained as soldiers and given no weapons, but they were sent to the Askali labor camp, as one example, for the manufacture of military equipment, building, construction, road construction, and maintenance, as well as agricultural farm work as laborers. They were forced to work under appalling conditions, especially those forced to work in the mines producing coal, iron ore, copper, chromium, antimony, mercury, gold, barite, borate, silicite, strontium, emery, feldspar, limestone, magnesite, marble, perlite, pumice, pyrites, etc. They were considered a potential fifth column insurgency and a danger if Germany ever attacked Turkey. And this fear was heightened after Germany invaded Greece and Bulgaria, Hungary, and Romania became allied to Germany and Italy. This pogrom lasted until July 1942, when these, the men who were still alive, were finally released. One of the primary intentions of the government was to seize the financial and physical assets of the non-Muslims who were essentially bankrupted, since they could not operate their businesses and were forced to sell their companies and assets for nearly nothing, just as had happened in Germany and Austria. Two major events followed with almost similar ambitions: Verlik Frikisi and Istanbul pogroms. Turkey denaturalized upwards of 5,000 Jews living abroad, most living in France, and by 1943, 93% of this policy targeted only Jews. Being abandoned by Turkey put Jews in Europe at high risk of being deported and murdered, and the Vichy French were actively assisting the SS and Gestapo in deporting Jews. It is believed that up to 2,500 Turkish Jews were deported to extermination camps such as Auschwitz and Sobibor, and several hundred more interned in Nazi concentration camps and used technically as qualified labor. When Nazi Germany issued the Heimschaffungsaktion, or the reparation ultimatum, in late 1942, which encouraged the neutral countries to take back their Jewish citizens, Turkish diplomats received specific instructions to avoid saving Turkish Jews. While the other neutral countries frequently intervened on behalf of their Jewish citizens, especially Sweden, living in German-occupied Europe, Turkey did the exact opposite. Unlike the efforts of such persons as Swedish diplomat Raoul Wallenberg in Hungary, historian Curry Gutstadt found that scarcely any records of Turkish interventions on behalf of Turkish Jewish citizens can be found. In fact, according to French historian Claire Zauch, while it was possible for Turkish authorities to intervene successfully on behalf of Turkish Jews, such interventions were rare, and they soon stopped altogether. Many Jews in France were exposed by their neighbors and surrendered to the SS. In a horrific turn of events in 1942, 769 Jewish refugees from Romania, and ironically supported by Hitler's ally, Marshal Ion Antonescu, secured visas for them to leave Romania and return home, with their objective being to reach British-controlled Palestine. After World War I, Antonescu had served as military attaché in Paris and in London, and in 1934 as chief of the Romanian General Staff, and he was friends with the Rothschild family. The great irony is that under Antonescu's leadership, Romania was responsible for the deaths of 300,000 Jews, as he did little to impede German efforts to round up not just Jews, but also Romani and Sinti gypsies, the majority dying in Auschwitz. Antonescu was executed by the Soviets in 1946. The ship leaving Romania, the MV Struka, departed Constanza and arrived in Istanbul on December 16, 1941, and the Jews wanted to apply for visas to Palestine, but they were informed they would not get visas to enter Palestine, and furthermore, despite being Turks, they would not be permitted entry into Turkey. The ship remained in quarantine for 2 months. Finally, on February 23, 1942, the Turkish police towed the unsafe, leaking ship out into the Black Sea and abandoned it, along with the passengers and crew. The next day, on February 24th, the ship sank. It is assumed that it was mistakenly torpedoed by a Soviet submarine, although there is not a follow-up report. Only one passenger, David Stoliar, survived. The event did raise international awareness and international protest against Britain's policy, despite the 1917 Balfour Declaration still being in effect, but British policy preventing threatened Jews from immigrating to Palestine was made quite clear. Referring to the disaster, Saddam explained that Turkey will not become the home of people who are not wanted by anyone else. To this day, the Turkish government never admitted to their handling of this crisis. Turkey imposed limits on these visas, issuing them only to be valid for 10 days, which meant they were unusable whenever wartime conditions led to delays. Gutstadt found that during the decisive years of 1942 and 1943, the flight through Turkey was largely blocked, and the majority of these Jews passed through Turkey in late 1944 after the Allies captured southeastern Europe. In fact, France in total, not in just the Vichy South, had the highest percentage of Nazi collaboration of any nation in Europe when it came to its citizens enlisting in the Waffen-SS and in handing over Jews. Despite the great post-war propaganda emitting from the Turkish government, there is only one verified case of a Turkish consul offering diplomatic and physical protection to non-Turkish Jews in France, a Frenchman named Monsieur Routier, who worked in the embassy. Behich Erkin, the Turkish ambassador in Paris, France, became aware of what Routier was doing on humanitarian grounds. Erkin forced him to stop the actions. Fuat Karim, the Turkish consul in Marseille, was totally complicit and gave the list of irregular Jews helped by Routier to Klaus Barbie, the Gestapo chief in Lyon, known as the Butcher of Lyon, in February 1943, and the majority of these Turks abandoned by their country were exterminated. Turkey finally acknowledged 631 high-profile Turkish Jews of the 5,000 Jews in northern France, and the majority of these persons were allowed to return to Turkey. The Turkish authorities in Paris stated that the remainder had up to now been Turkish citizens, yet nothing would be done to help them. What had been documented was that in rare cases, assistance was provided by some Turkish officials who simply disregarded instructions from the Ankara government and had been granting identity documents to Turkish Jews on a case-by-case basis. In many documented cases, these Turkish officials were not operating out of altruistic and humanitarian reasons, bribery, extortion, and often sexual favors were expected from those needing documents, and that under international law these Jews had legal rights to these papers. Threats to separate children from their mothers unless these demands were met, as well as breaking up families, worked as applied pressure. Despite these grim reports, there were some bright shining lights of humanity among a few Turks, such as Consul General Oskaya, who disobeyed orders and tried to save 72 Turkish Jews in February 1944. When 40 Turkish Jews were arrested on March 24th and 25th, 1944, and sent to the Haidari concentration camp in Greece, the local Turkish representatives managed to secure freedom for 32 Jews and return them to Turkey. Likewise, the Turkish consul in Rhodes, Selahattin Ülkümen, saved at least 50 Jews, including 15 to 20 whose Turkish citizenship had been taken away. He managed to make deals with the SS to convince them to hand these people over. His story is not dissimilar to German industrialist Oskar Schindler. Such was the drama of his efforts, and he is the only Turk recognized as righteous among the nations as of 2020 in Israel for saving lives. Following the German setbacks on the Eastern Front after Stalingrad and the collapse of the Afrika Korps in North Africa, the Turks seemed to see the writing on the wall. In response to the changing conditions, on May 1, 1943, Turkey agreed to start releasing British, American, and other Allied soldiers, mostly airmen who had crash-landed in Turkish territory. The International Red Cross did have access to the internees held in all the neutral nations, but these visits were not allotted to the political prisoners in Turkey who were not considered prisoners of war, despite being used as slave labor. The number of those persons enslaved in the labor camps is not known, and likewise, the numbers who died is also a mystery. But the situation had been leaking out, and the intelligence services of the Allies became aware of the situation. They also made an agreement with the Axis powers to repatriate German airmen and their allies as well. It was well established that British Prime Minister Winston Churchill was reasonably upset that Turkey had not joined the Allies and continued supplying Germany with more materiel, especially chromium. Turkey also saw Stalin's ambitions in creating Eastern Europe by 1944, and his special interest in Turkey in relation to dominating the Bosporus and Dardanelles, access to the Mediterranean Sea. In fact, Stalin's comment regarding taking Turkey by the scruff of the neck to achieve his aims were taken seriously. On February 23, 1945, Turkey finally decided to declare war and join the Allies once they saw the inevitable defeat of Germany. And all of the Axis allies in the Balkans had already shifted their allegiance to the Allies following the Soviet invasions of those nations in 1944. Italy had already changed sides in the war in 1943. Turkey never admitted to its pogrom against the Jews and other minorities. In fact, to this day, they deny it ever happened. In 2013, Turkey's European Affairs Minister, Egemen Bajes, boldly claimed, "In our history, there does not exist any genocide," apparently forgetting the Armenians and Jews. The European Affairs Ministry also released an astounding statement that stated, "Turkish society has always been away from anti-Semitic feelings, has never shown any feelings of anti-Semitism and xenophobia. Our people have always embraced their Jewish brothers." Such is the cover-up attempt by the Turkish government. After the war, the Turkish government whitewashed their role regarding Jews, just as the French did, and Turkish officials even participated in Holocaust Memorial Day ceremonies for the first time in 2014. The irony was not lost on many of the other dignitaries present at this ceremony, and there was even wild shock when Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu claimed, "There is no trace of genocide in our history. Hostility towards the other has no room in our civilization." However, the facts prove otherwise, and according to genocide scholars Roger W. Smith, Eric Markuson, and Robert J. Lifton, Turkey has shown a determination to deny the Armenian genocide by acknowledging the Holocaust. And historian Mark David Baer described this as performative conscience clearing. These ceremonies and the Turkish dignitaries spouting the official line also failed to mention the fact that if Turkish Jews' citizenship had been openly recognized, and proper diplomatic channels engaged, those persons would have probably survived the Holocaust. Turkey has been trying to enter the European Union for 2 decades, but it continues to fail to meet the basic criteria. The most glaringly obvious problem is its records on human rights where the Kurds are concerned. Turkey never really hid its anti-Semitic feelings, and the totalitarian Erdogan government's total support of Islamic terrorist groups, despite being a NATO country, should not be a surprise. Thanks for watching today's episode of Forgotten History. If you like this episode, please consider becoming a channel member or joining our Patreon page. This would help us offset the ever-increasing cost of production. As always, please like, share, and comment. And if you have any show ideas, please contact us, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Until next time.